I want to talk to you today about a revolution that is about to hit your business. And if you take advantage of it, you will have a competitive advantage over almost everyone you compete with. And if you miss it, you will miss the most important opportunity of our generation. I call it the purpose revolution, an emerging global employee, consumer, and investor all over the world who are asking different questions, who are saying, I want my work, my buying, my investing, not just to meet my selfish needs, but to make a difference in the world. Now, I've spent the last 25 years of my life writing books and trying to help companies create engaging, soulful work environments to understand where the puck is going in terms of the values of employees and customers, trying to get people to step up and create accountable cultures where people will take responsibility and get things done, the things that every business in this room wants. But I want to tell you that there is a lever that almost every leader I've worked with in the last 25 years, with maybe 5% exception, miss the most powerful lever for winning their employees and their customers. And I want to tell you a personal story of when I first discovered the power of purpose to transform how we do our jobs. I was 24 years old and I was in graduate school in Chicago at the University of Chicago. And I had to work to put myself through school, so I got a job in a drugstore working in a postal substation, like a Shoppers Drug Market, working as a postal clerk in one of the poorest neighborhoods in America on the south side of Chicago. And after 3 weeks of working 23 hours a week in this job, I have to tell you, I hated the job. Because to me, the job, within a week I had mastered the job. I spent my entire day with a line that never ended for the entire shift, selling stamps and weighing packages and writing money orders and doing the things that you do when you're a postal clerk. I didn't see any meaning in the job, and I didn't sense that my boss saw much meaning in it either. And by a month into the job, I was just literally going through the motions, as millions of people do when they go through their jobs. And then for the rest of my life, I will remember the moment my job changed. It was a rainy morning in Chicago. I know it was raining because the third customer in line that morning was a woman well into her 80s who was wearing a brimmed hat, and it was still raining, dripping on her shoulders as she asked me to write a money order for her. Now, in every job, there's something that really aggravates you, some task you hate the most, and in the post office, writing money orders was that task, because it was one of those old, credit card machines, and every time you did one, about every 3 or 4 would rip, so as you would try and write the money orders for people, the line would get longer and longer. And as I'm doing her money order, I just casually asked her, "And how are you this morning?" And she said, "Well, to be honest, I'm not doing very well. My daughter is in the hospital about a mile from here, and she has cancer, and she's dying. And the doctors told me that she may die any day. She could die in the next hour." And she said, "For God's sakes, I should be there." She said, "But if I don't pay my rent by 5 o'clock today, they're going to evict me. And those lousy people who run my building will not let you pay in cash. And I have no one else in the world to get this money order for me but me." She said, "But I should be there. For God's sakes, my daughter is dying." Now, I have to tell you, I don't really remember much of what I said to her. I do remember I was kind. I do remember I was gentle. I do remember for the first time in that month in the post office, it occurred to me there might be some meaning in my job. But what I will remember for the rest of my life is at the end of our conversation, she walked to the door of the drugstore and she turned around, and I could see her walking back down the aisle, coming back, and walked behind the counter and interrupted the customer who was already doing business with me. And she took her shaking, feeble hand and put it on my forearm, and she stared me in the eyes and she said, "Son, I just want to thank you. Thank you for being so kind. You do know, don't you? You do know, don't you? You made my day." And in that moment, my job was transformed. For the rest of that year, for 23 hours a week, I realized that I had a chance in that post office to make a difference in the lives of those people in this one of the poorest neighborhoods in North America who had incredibly difficult lives. And if I could just show up in a different way, maybe in that job I could make a difference. You may wonder, does this really matter? Let me tell you about some fascinating research by Amy Wierzinski at Yale University, who has studied more than anybody else in the world how people see their jobs and how it impacts us. And it turns out that almost every one of us in this room and every person who works for us sees their jobs in one of three ways. It's either a job and that's all it is. I'm doing it to trade for what I get for it. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd be gone. I'm just doing this to get what I'm getting for it, the money and the benefits. The second is some people see their job, the role they're in, as a career, which is I'm here to learn, I'm here to grow, I'm here to kind of build my skill for myself so that I can, grow my career and do something else. And then some people see their job as a calling, from the Latin word vocatio, and what it means is that they see their job as a deep way they are being of service to something that they care about, so that the job is actually a part of their core identity. And it turns out what's really fascinating is it doesn't matter what your job is, it's not a very good predictor of how you see your job. There are surgeons who see their job as just a job, and there are janitors who see their job as a calling. But here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out if you see your job as a calling, you are more engaged, provide better customer service, do more discretionary hours without pay, you're less likely to call in sick, you're happier, and you're more committed to your organization than whether you see your job in either of those other two ways. And what I'm trying to say to you is that the one thing that most leaders don't get is that one of the most powerful things we have to tap into is missing in almost every organization. I'll talk about that in just a moment. I've had the privilege, one of my clients is NASA. And by the way, a pretty cool day when you get to go to work at NASA because they do some really cool stuff. But let me tell you what I've learned at NASA. Now you have to remember, NASA is a federal agency and one of the most dysfunctional bureaucracies in the world. Their budget is constantly under, scrutiny. It takes, 100,000 steps to do everything from hiring someone to getting a decision made, and now they have to worry about getting tweeted about, so it's getting worse every day. But here's the interesting thing. They have one of the highest engagement rates of any company in the world, one of the lowest turnover rates of any company organization in the world. They have no problem recruiting the best talent in the world. And at my experience at NASA, at least 40% of the people I meet at NASA will say to me when they were a young child, the only job they dreamed of having was working at NASA. Now, I don't know about you, I don't work with very many companies where 40% of their people say, you know what, when I was a little kid, I dreamed of working for you. And you know why. It's all about purpose. But there's a problem with purpose. I call it the gap. Any of you ever been to the UK, ridden the tube, mind the gap, and mind the gap, right? And of course, mind the gap is because at a train station, a gap is dangerous. You fall between the gap, you can die. People do that. But the interesting thing in business, the opposite is true. A gap is the opportunity. The moment there's a gap between what people want and what they're getting, some business is going to differentiate themselves, that makes sense, by closing the gap. Let me tell you what the gap is. 85% of employees say it's really important for them to work with a company that is highly ethical, but 30% of employees say in the last year they've been asked to do something at work that they felt was against their values. 70% of people say I would work harder for a company if I had a sense of purpose and really believed in their mission. 50% of millennials say they would take a pay cut to work at a company that aligned with their values and gave them a sense of purpose. And by the way, I work at a lot of companies. I can tell you this is not just something millennials say on surveys. Every week I hear about millennials who are working with their feet based on that choice. But here's the interesting thing. Remember, 85% I want to work for an ethical company, 70% purpose would drive me, 50% I take a pay cut to work with purpose. By the way, 85% of customers say I want to buy from a company that does good. Here's the gap. 75% of employees in Canada say the company that they work for is mostly interested in profits and their own needs, not the needs of their customers and clients, never mind their communities. 80% of customers say I'm routinely confused about whether the companies I buy from are actually good or not. Get the picture? There's a gap, and the gap is the opportunity. And this, therefore, is all about leadership. And one of the questions I would like to ask you in your organization is, how are leaders doing at driving purpose? And what do I mean by leaders driving purpose? Let me give you some real examples. One of my clients is Manulife, great company, I believe in them. Don Gouloin, the CEO, I have been at meetings when I have seen Don Gouloin speak passionately to his people about the fact that at Manulife, we really are in the business of helping people achieve their dreams and aspirations. We're in the business of taking this thing that people hate to do and this stressor about managing your money away from them. And I have heard him say to his people, the problem with big companies like us is that over time, by the way, I love what he says, every company that got successful because at one time they met a real need of someone because they cared about meeting that need. But over time, as you get bigger, it just becomes about the quarterly profits and how much have you sold and how many widgets have we produced. And we forget that we only got successful because we have a purpose. And it happens to the leaders at every level. I think about Molly Maid. Some of you may have Molly Maids or have a cleaning person comes to your house. And, cleaning homes is not always glamorous work. And when I recently did some work with Molly Maid, as I do every time I work with a client, I say, give me the names of the most successful people who are going to be at that event, because I want to talk to them and find out what they're doing. So they gave me the names of the 5 most successful franchise owners they had. You know what I learned? Every one of those 5 franchise owners was driving purpose every day. One of them, a young woman, new in the business, but my second most successful franchise. I love what she said. She said, when I hire a cleaning professional, a maid, the first thing I tell them is, you're not just cleaning homes, you're giving our clients the greatest gift, the most precious thing any human being has, the gift of time. Because people would rather spend time with their kids, time on their hobbies, times with the things they love, and you are giving them the gift of time. One of the other guy, the most successful franchise owner, I love what he said to me. He said, a lot of our clients are older people, and it may be that the only person who goes into their home on a given day is our cleaning professionals. And I tell my cleaning professionals every day, when you go into the home of an older person, you're not just cleaning homes, you're alleviating loneliness. And what he does is literally every month he brings in clients and customers to tell his people the difference that they're making. Or what about Royal Bank, who's been a client of mine? And one of the experiments we did at Royal Bank is we asked branch managers to just start every meeting with a space for people to say, how in the last week, since the last time we met, have we really made a difference for our clients and customers in a profound way? And in those branches that implemented that and did it, a 16% jump in engagement in one survey cycle. One of the stickiest ideas I have a few clients in the room, one of the stickiest ideas I ever came up with was this simple idea, 100% responsibility, no excuses. Clients love it because every leader I've ever worked with wants people to be 100% responsible, no excuses, step up, get it done. But here's the interesting thing. Most of the time when we tell people they've got to step up, we tell them, you got to step up because we're on a burning platform. Am I right? We say, if we don't do this, we're going to die. If we don't do this, the shareholders are going to kill us, right? And here's the interesting thing. I tell leaders all the time, don't tell your people you're on a burning platform, because you tell people you're on a burning platform, any logical, marketable person will say, I should work for a company that's not on a platform that's burning. Does that make sense? If we want people to step up, we've got to give them a burning ambition. And that's all about purpose. Qantas Airlines, one of my clients, went through a crisis 4 years ago, had to cut $2 billion out of the business, cut 5,000 jobs. Their debt rating is on the line. There is a chance the second oldest airline in the world was about to go out of business. And they were appealing to their people, we got to do the burning platform, we got to do the burning platform. Until actually in a conversation I had with the senior team, we said, you know what, maybe we've got this wrong. Maybe we've got to remind people why it matters that this airline survives. And the leaders started talking about what this airline means to Australia. Now, if there are any Australians in the room, they know this. Australians, we tell you, if they're anywhere in the world, the moment they see the kangaroo on that tail and they get on the airplane, they feel like they're home already. And the leaders started talking about what this airline meant to them, and they started doing these sessions all across the company, asking people, why does this matter if this airline survives? But not just so we can keep our jobs, but because we're somehow making a difference. If you think this doesn't matter, let me tell you a wonderful story. This is one of my favorite clients. He's a guy named Ray Davis. When he was 37 years old, he took over as the CEO of 3 little tiny branches in Southern Oregon, South Umpqua Savings and Loan, 3 dying branches in a dying lumber town, a very mediocre place, to be honest. But Ray Davis had a vision. He started sharing with the people in those 3 little branches, I want us to create the greatest customer service bank in the history of banking. I want you one day to be at a party, and when you tell someone you work for this bank, they will fall all over you with unconditional love, because we will treat customers like no bank has ever treated customers in the history of banking. And then these 3 little branches in this dying lumber town, a lot of people were cynical. But a lot of people said, you know, Ray, that would be pretty cool. 3 months in, he took a vote. The vote was, 80% will do it. Start answering the phone one Monday morning out of the blue. Welcome to Umpqua, the world's greatest bank. First Monday morning they started doing that. One of the decades-old customer, a farmer, said, what the hell happened? I was in there on Saturday. I'll make a long story short. Every day in every branch they had a meeting. If we were the world's greatest customer service bank, if we cared about and treated our customers differently than any other bank in the world, what would we do? And the bank grew until there were hundreds of branches in 4 states, and they made retired lumber people had a couple of shares in that tiny savings and loan, multimillionaires. Through the financial crisis, in spite of having to cut a dividend, they remained, one of the top 30 places to work according to Fortune magazine in America. And that bank grew for one simple reason. People stepped up even during the crisis for one simple reason, because they always knew that bank was not just about making money, it was about serving people. And as leaders, when we miss that, we're in trouble. And if you doubt that, think about this guy, Steve Jobs. Now here's the really fascinating. How many think Apple's a pretty successful company? Yeah, one of the most successful companies of our generation in every metric that you can measure success. But here's the interesting thing about Steve Jobs. If you know anything about him and his history, he was not like a great manager in a lot of ways. A lot of the things that I teach leaders every week: care about people, get to know them, recognize them, appreciate them, don't micromanage them. This is not Steve Jobs for the most part. But the interesting thing is, not only did he create a sustainably successful company, but he created among the most loyal employees in the world. And you might ask the question, why, in spite of the fact that he did so many things wrong? And here's why. Because from the very beginning, Apple was never just about profits. In fact, Steve Jobs, his entire career, said product before profit, product before profit. And you could also insert the word purpose before profit. If we create products that change the world, that change people's lives, we will get profits. Why do you think he had people sign their names like artists, on those original Macintosh motherboards? And think about this for a moment. Think about when he had to recruit a CEO, John Sculley. Many of you may know he wanted to get a real CEO. He felt, I can't take this company any further. John Sculley at the time was running Latin America for PepsiCo and routinely believed to be the next CEO of PepsiCo, one of the largest, most reputable brands in the world. At the time, Macintosh is a silly, not profitable startup company with a box that only geeks liked. And he recruits John Sculley for weeks and weeks, and John Sculley says, no, Steve, no. And finally, he's in his office one more time, and John Sculley says, Steve, the answer is no. Why in the world would I leave one of the most prestigious brands in the world to come to work for you? And on the way out of the office, Steve Jobs says, John, I get it. The answer is no. But before I leave, I want to ask you a question. Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or would you like to change the world? And 2 weeks later, John Sculley called up Steve Jobs and said, I'll take the pay cut, I'll take the job. But here's the thing. It's not just John Sculley. It's a maid who goes into someone's home. It's someone like me, a 24-year-old who works for you, whose leader saw no purpose in that job other than making money in that drugstore. But when I ignited in that moment and saw purpose, my job changed. It's those customer service reps and tellers in a branch at RBC who suddenly said, wow, we're being of service, or at Umpqua Bank. It's about us as leaders knowing that there is this engine of possibility and engagement within people, and that what people want most of all, and by the way, people want all those other things. They want a great career, they want a great salary, they want to be appreciated. But the one lever most of us leave off the table is the most powerful level and the emerging lever, the purpose revolution. And I'll ask you, are you and your leaders ready to lead in the purpose revolution? Thank you so much. Great to be here.